Welcome back to the Josh Calloway Podcast. This is Josh Calloway, State Representative in the 10th District of Kentucky, and excited to bring you this podcast, actually recording this podcast on Veterans Day. And so I got Angela, my wife, here with me. We got Aaron back in the studio, and it's an exciting day thinking about all of the courage and the people that have fought in the wars past, the people that are serving right now. And I'm always amazed at the dedication from the past in regard to the soldiers and how they have fought to preserve the liberty and the freedom that we have. And we can never say enough about them, but we do have this day set aside that we can honor them. And I think there were some moments of silence across the country today and try to celebrate soldiers. And so I've got people in my family that have served. Some people, Aaron, I don't know if you have anybody in your family.
So my dad's biological dad was killed in Vietnam, and then his grandpa, my great grandpa, was in Korea and maybe World War II. That's the only ones that I know about. I've seen my biological grandpa's Purple Heart.
Oh,
that was really cool. We got to go down and see his
My
family.
great uncle was killed in Korea, and my dad was named after him, and his Purple Hearts got passed down to my dad and then down to my oldest brother, who was actually named after him as well. And then I have two other brothers that served in the military for several years, did multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and a brother that struggles physically because of an injury that happened over there. Yeah. But it's a great day. It's a patriotic day. It's time that we get to reflect back on people in the service and dedication that they've given to us. And so I put something out about it today. Just wanted to make sure that we mentioned it, even though when people watch this, we'll be past the day. But every day is a great day to celebrate soldiers.
I saw something today I thought was pretty interesting. It was a quote that said, every moment of freedom is a moment paid for by a veteran or a soldier. I thought that was pretty neat. We do take that for granted a lot, how, in rural areas, then a lot of us, like we're talking about, have relatives. It's very close to us. We have relatives that are veterans or, family members or whatever that were in military service. So you think about it maybe a lot more than other people do, but we still take advantage.
Yes. I saw a veteran shirt today, and I don't remember the exact quote, but it said something like, or to the effect that when I went to war, I did not fight because I hated what was in front of me. I fought because I loved what I left behind. Yeah, that's good. And I thought that was really good, because that's, regardless of how people feel about wars and all the stuff that we've got ourselves into as a nation over the last several decades, the fact that people are willing to serve and they sacrifice their family and their time. And I had, unfortunately, a brain tumor when I was 18, and therefore I couldn't go serve. And so I tell everybody I just stayed home and took care of my brother's families while they were overseas. So, but it's an awesome day. And so with that being said, one of the things that our soldiers have fought for is to preserve the rights and the freedoms that we have still here in America. And we just got past a week ago one of the greatest freedoms that we have as a nation, and that is the ability to vote. Yes. And the outcome, I know there's people out there that are melting down right now, but I've been pretty happy over the last week, because most of the people that I was pulling for actually did win, including me.
Including yourself, yeah.
Including me. I did win. Are you
sure you didn't vote for the Democrat?
I think I got Angie's vote.
Right.
So that was the one that put me over the top. She was on the fence for a little while.
Well, as the only lady in the church that's allowed to vote, that's really important.
Well, I know. That vote goes a long way.
Only because she's my wife,
right.
Right. So anyway, I actually let her drive me while I sat in the back seat to the polls. So
that worked out really well.
She was my chauffeur for that day.
And my wife was like, "What's an election? What's going on here? Yeah.
What are they talking about?"
Yeah. I think that's like something that's kind of important. I've talked to several people that's the same way. Like my wife is more of, before a lot of stuff that happened in 2020, which is kind of, she knew I was interested in politics,
Right.
but she would go vote and do her duty. But the things about the men in women's sports and the men going into women's bathrooms, all of that stuff, like really energized a lot of women to go vote.
Yes.
And might have been, I've seen like several, results polls that have come out, put out by, insiders in the Republican side on a national level. And with undecided voters, especially, or low propensity voters, then the transgender issue was one of the main issues that drove them. They even said it was the highest issue from their numbers in the Trump side.
Right.
That actually swayed them toward Trump because he took such a stand against.
Some of the polls I also saw reflected that among young people, that actually young college age people,
Yes,
that was a big issue to them. And there's been some people of that age group that have got vocal about that issue, and they brought a lot of light to it, but it definitely did drive turnout. And I think it's because we live in a society that many people, for whatever reason, have rejected common sense.
Yeah. Well, and we just watched over the summer, in the Olympics, a man like punch a woman in the face, 3 different women in the face over and over again, and then win a gold medal for it. I mean, that really is
Disturbing.
Before we
Very
go any
disturbing.
Yeah.
Before we go any further,
Okay.
I do have a question I have to ask my
No
wife.
worries.
Do you plan to shave your head that since Trump won? And if you do, can we do that on the podcast? Because I think that would probably bring some views. So,
It might, but absolutely not. I'm very excited that Trump won.
well, the meltdown that people have had on the left, just people just totally losing their mind and all the things that were said. But this is what I think is funny, is that a lot of the political class, they've already moved on.
Yeah.
Like they're on to the next
They
election.
fed everybody such a line.
They're
Oh, my
ready.
goodness.
They're saying, Nazis, threat to democracy, Hitler. They used all of those terms. And then Joe Biden, as soon as it was over, he's like, yeah, we're looking forward to helping them transfer the power, and it's going to be peaceful. And like, you don't do that to Hitler.
Yeah.
They were so incredibly wrong, though. If you remember, it was Trump is going to be toast. I think it'll be tight, but he's still, she's going to win. It's tight. It's a razor thin margin. And it was a landslide.
Yeah.
Trump won. We got the Senate. We got the House. We even got Josh in. I mean, it was a big win for everybody.
It's a big deal. I won by like 69% of the vote. And so I think from the top all the way down.
And it wasn't straight ticket Republican voters.
Exactly
I
right.
just want to throw that out there.
No, I think you highlighted that.
I did. I broke down the numbers on it just because it's interesting if you're interested in the numbers of a campaign or whatever. If you have in a big presidential election, that means that you would have beaten your Democrat opponent, even if he got all of his straight Democrat voters, straight Democrat ticket voters, in both counties. If he had gotten all of those and you didn't get any straight Republican ticket votes, you still would have beaten your opponent. That's kind of one reason to break it down that way.
But I think it's kind of insulting to say that people don't know who they're voting for if they decide to do straight ticket.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you're not giving that person credit to know their own mind or how they want to vote.
Well, this is one thing that I think has always been just a good principle as a person in politics is don't insult the voters.
Right.
That is why would you want to call them dumb?
That is one thing that people have missed about Trump. And it's very surprising to me that people have missed it for 8 years. And I don't think, it should be a big secret, but apparently anybody didn't know it. But Trump never attacked the voters.
Right.
Ever. He attacked Republicans. He attacked Democrats. He attacked the FBI. He attacked the media. He attacked the CIA. He attacked Ted Cruz and told him his wife was ugly. He did all, but he never, and they all talk about how undisciplined Trump is. He knew from the beginning, do not attack the voters.
Right.
And you look at the Democrat fallout from this, they're blaming white women. They're blaming black men. They're blaming men in general. They're trying to turn men against women and women against men. they always blame the voters. They never blame themselves.
Well,
Yes.
and then the other thing too about Trump is that Trump's going to lose, right? They are all saying he's going to lose because Orange Man bad, right? And then and then he wins, and the reason he won is because Orange Man bad. It's the same thing. He's a terrible person, so he's going to lose. And then he wins, and he's a terrible person.
And you're all bad too.
And I think Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, even put out and basically said, Trump's un-American. Anybody that votes for Trump is un-American.
Yeah.
And anybody that supports Trump is un-American.
Yeah. Right. And if you were, sorry to step all over your comment there, but if you remember, Biden did that speech
in the back seat.
Yeah. Yeah. Did that speech in Philadelphia.
That's an inside joke, by the way.
Do you remember that speech in Philadelphia he did with like the black background and the red, and he came out like screaming, pumped up on drugs or whatever he's pumped up on.
Yeah.
Don't want to slander anybody.
All jacked up on Mountain Dew.
Yeah, jacked up on Mountain Dew or coffee or whatever. And he came out screaming about the MAGA people and all this.
Yeah.
He just attacked everybody that voted for Trump. Why would any of the 3 million people that voted for Trump last election come over and vote for the Democrats? He just told them, you're fascist, you're un-American, all fascists. Yeah. You're un-American, all this, not fashionable or anything like that, but fascist and un-American. Why would any of those people go vote? And Trump did not insult any of Biden's supporters at all.
Right.
So
none of them.
312 to 226 is the electoral vote, and then the popular vote. And so that is interesting for a lot of reasons, because it sends a mandate to people that are serving in Washington, D.C., that it's not just important that the president is there, but it's also important that you put forward and fast track his agenda.
Right.
Because the people in your districts, and I was looking at some things, some maps, electoral maps, but also vote maps that were showing the percentages of shift to conservatism or to Republican votes. And areas I'm talking about, like Gary, Indiana.
Right.
Yes.
Areas in New York.
Right.
Area around Chicago. Some of these places had a 12 and 15% shift.
Right.
Some of the bluest cities shifted the hardest to the right.
So the New York Times did a new thing, which I thought was really cool. I like diving into all kind of the numbers of stuff and going through all the counties and all that stuff as the election's going on all across the country. They did something that was really cool, and they had they would have like a little arrow on the country, and I'm sure we have some kind of graphic we can put in there, but maybe Kyle Magic Man over there. But they had like a graphic where they would have like a arrow pointing red in all the counties that had shifted to the right, and then an arrow pointing blue in the counties that were shifting to the left toward the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And it was all red. And they ended up, it was so like unbelievable that they ended up like shrinking the size of some of the arrows to, try to say which direction it shifted a little bit to the right or more to the right, because it looked so overwhelming day after election day.
There was a lot of surprise, though. Even, was it New Jersey?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
There were some huge shifts there. And I think one person put it this way, that Republicans came closer to flipping New York than Democrats did to flipping Florida.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So when you look at it in that perspective, there was a huge change.
Oh, Florida was called early.
Yes. And we know what Ron DeSantis has done there in that state and the way that he has worked it and governed. And I think Miami-Dade is the first time, I can't remember how many elections and how long it's been since a Republican actually won that county. And so there's a couple thoughts about it that I wanted to throw out. So some of it is that some people are saying, well, people are rejecting this illogical craziness that is going on in the country. And I think that's definitely part of it. And then some people are saying that the Republicans are not as conservative as they used to be. And so it's actually bringing more people together in the middle. What is your thoughts about that?
So maybe Miss Angie, do you have any thoughts about that before I go into my long?
You have a long thought.
Well, it could be.
I think that there are more people that are somewhat conservative, but basically have common sense.
Right.
And the news media, I think, has been the biggest voice in making it seem like a lot of people are far left.
Right.
And you feel like when you watch the news or read an article or different things that, wow, everybody's going crazy. But this election proves that people don't want men and women's sports. They don't want you indoctrinating their kids. I think there's just some common ground, some basic morality that people are not ready to let go of yet.
Right.
And with that being said, before you go in to answer my question, I think there was some specific things that Kamala had said. She had said that she supported a mandatory buyback on guns.
Right.
She had stated that she supported taxpayer funds to pay for transgender surgeries in jails and prisons. She had said a lot of things that she didn't support. She was going to end fracking on day one. There was a lot of things that she had said that she was going to do, then flipped on that policy, and people just didn't believe it. Right. They did not take the bait. I think it's wise they didn't take the bait, because I absolutely believe that they have been trying to take our guns. They want to censor free speech, just the foundational constitutional principles. But back to the question, the move into the middle.
It could be a very long answer, and I have a million thoughts on it. So, but I'm going to try not to do that. But there's kind of a changing of the guard of the conservative movement. And I really think the people that are leading conservative thought are just as conservative as they've ever been. Mm-hmm. But they've really put an emphasis on winning elections. And you have to do that if you're going to push back against the free reign that the progressives and the liberals have been having for decades, Right. It's more important to get the three people on the Supreme Court that are going to help overturn Roe v. Wade than it is for your candidate to say that they support, zero abortions, but don't ever do anything about it.
Right.
It's one thing to be a conservative in speech, but people that voted for Bush and Romney, they personally didn't have any stricter of a stance on things like, and really this is the two issues that we're talking about. If we're talking about more conservative versus less conservative, it's going to be abortion and it's going to be free trade. Those are the two issues that they would say, well, you're not a true conservative because you support tariffs and you're less on abortion. Trump's stance on abortion is no different than Ronald Reagan's stance. Yeah. It's the same exact stance, and probably no different than Bush and Romney's stance. But they were in a position where it was just about a message, because nothing was going to change for them. There was nothing at stake. They could say that they were anti-abortion, but there was no way to be able to change the law. Right. Trump, while they would say, well, he's not anti-abortion enough, he actually did something to give us the opportunity to change it. That is a conservative principle.
Yes.
Right.
To take back, if you never take back any ground from the liberals and the progressives, then you may be a conservative speaker, but you're not putting conservative policies into action.
And that's the thing. We kept losing ground.
Right. And then about free trade, and this is a little nerdy, but about free trade and tariffs. The situation with the debt has gotten so bad that the most efficient way to start drawing back the debt and taking that bureaucratic waste back is, first of all, to grow the economy. That was Trump's first term. That was his main thing. And then COVID happened. So their thought is if you double the size of the economy by opening all of the valves on energy, first of all, and you make America the most dominant energy producer and seller in the world, then your debt gets cheaper. And then every time that you cut, you're cutting it for less than you would have, 2 years before.
Right.
And then the tariffs part, then, that's always been kind of been an issue with people. Here's my argument and thought about tariffs. They say, well, it's cheaper to ship things from overseas. The reason that it's cheaper to ship things from overseas is because the American military and the Navy, it protects the seas. If those companies were having to provide their own battleships and their own protection crossing the seas, it wouldn't be cheaper to ship things back and forth. So if they want to take advantage, at which the American military is paid for by the taxpayers, by us, if they want to take advantage of how cheap it is to do that, they can pay a fee to help support the military instead of us paying it, And then I would also say, obviously, what has been happening has not worked as far as bringing costs down or whatever it is.
Right.
It has not worked. And so if you don't like tariffs, that's totally fine. But our manufacturing jobs are overseas. We've become a strictly consumer society. So many people nowadays are employed by making content on social media instead of by doing things that actually produce something. It's been a fundamental shift in our workforce. Mm-hmm. And if free trade makes your society a slave to other countries, that's not free trade.
Right.
So if tariffs help to bring that back, I'm all for it.
Mm-hmm. And I think the debt, we have to do something about it. It's just one of the greatest national security threats that we have.
It's not a conservative principle to be enslaved to other countries economically. Mm-hmm. That's not conservative. Yeah. So you can say that we're less conservative. Sorry, I'm still going on this.
No,
how your brain works. But you can say there's people that will lecture you, well, you don't know what it's like to be a true conservative. I know what it's like to grow under a group of conservative leaders that just let the left take over everything. Mm-hmm. There's people my age with children that are growing up that aren't going to let that happen. And if you don't like how they do it, that's totally fine. But they can just continue to sit and lecture like they've been doing for 40 years. Yeah. They let Reagan do everything, and then they lived on Reagan for ages, and let H.W. Bush come in and raise taxes, and George W. Bush come in with no child left behind. And a lot of the things we're dealing with in the education system today is because of those policies.
It came through that.
Big government, non-conservative policies.
Right. And this is the thing is we could... you can tell that we're excited because some of the people we supported won. But this is not just about dunking on the left or saying we got it.
We got to work.
We got to go to work.
Got to work.
We have to go to work. One of the greatest challenges that I face as a Kentucky state legislator is how come there's 80 out of 100 in there and you cannot get some certain conservative policy passed? What is the problem? And so I think there is a mandate, but there's a mandate to go to work. Yes. And some of that has already happened. I've been encouraged. I think Lee Zeldin from New York got appointed as over the EPA. Yeah. And I think
Rubio's Secretary of State, Susie Wiles. Again, we're talking about kind of inside baseball sometimes about like chiefs of staff. But,
right.
Susie Wiles, I thought, was a great pick for chief of staff as far just because of how the campaign was run and how they always stayed on message and it kept rolling, even though Trump can kind of derail stuff a little bit. And
access is important too. And I think that she has proved that she can control that access to make sure the wrong people are not getting in his ear.
Here was the statement. I listened to a podcast, which, nobody, if I shout it out, it's not going to like help them at all. But I listened to a podcast and they have a lot of connections. It's really, really good. And there's people from both sides with sense and there's a lot of sanity on it. But the thing that they said was one of her stipulations was, I get to control what kind of access the clown car has to Trump, and there's, what I'm talking about. There's people like clingers on and stuff that want to be in his orbit. And I suspect that her being there is going to be a good, like Brother Josh is saying, controlling access to him is going to be a big deal.
It's important. And he was a rookie when he came in the first time. Yeah. And there was a lot of people that got in his ear. And he's made that statement. Yes. And I think Don Jr. has went around really making that case. And he's been saying, I'm spending the next 90 days making sure that the right people get into the cabinet.
And there's one guy who I'm not a huge fan of. His name's Mike Davis. I don't know if you know him. And I don't know him at all, but I've just seen a couple of statements that he's made, and I don't like his attitude of how he's approaching it. You know, it's almost like he's, if you want me to recommend you to Trump or whatever, you know, and I understand that's his personality. He's a lawyer, you know, that's what they do. But it's better to kind of let the people like Don Jr. and Susie Wiles, I believe that's her last name, run that scene in a meaningful way.
The other thing I think it's important to point out outside of the mandate that is there, but it also provides a window of opportunity. One thing that we have seen is when leftists get into positions of power, the fact that we're involved in the gospel outreach and we're involved in ministry inside of areas that the government has control, such as juvenile detention centers and jails and prisons and things of that nature, a lot of times they push that away, and it gives us as believers a window of opportunity to get the gospel out and to really be able to build on the cause of Christ as Christians and as believers. And, you know, people have posed this question to me, you know, is Donald Trump a Christian? Is he a believer? And there's all kinds of definitions of what people thinks that is. And we know what the Bible says and all that. But this is the thing about government. Somebody said something to me about me being elected and basically said, I need you to go up there and make laws for me. And I said, well, my number one goal when I get up there is actually to figure out how that we can leave you alone.
Right. Yeah.
That's really what we want. And so the thing that we saw that with the Trump administration, regardless of how people felt about Matt Bevin. In the state, we saw it with the Bevin administration, is that when those people appoint their people inside of these bureaucratic positions, that freedom to be able to minister grows.
Right.
And we got in more ministries, more avenues of ministry during that time period than we have ever been in as a ministry.
And as soon as Andy Beshear gets in, then there's within a few months, there's immediate issues that start popping up with those ministry things. You know, either they're trying to tax you or they're trying to restrict your access or get you to sign something that'll say you won't say certain things, you know. They go to work as soon as they get elected, basically.
Angie has heard me many times rant about the governor's executive order to ban conversion therapy, you know, and people have asked me about it and why is it such a big deal to me, but it is an attack on the truth, on the very tool that we use to be able to reach people that are struggling.
Which is not shock treatment, by the way. That's not what he's talking about. He's not talking about the most effective tool that we have is shock treatment. You know, that's what the governor wants you to think it is. But he wants to associate you simply preaching. I went and, you know, I don't want to spread around, you know, stuff about private, you know, conversations that you have with people in the jail system. But I went to kind of a counseling session with a man who was struggling with some of these issues. And if I'm not able to tell him what the Bible says, I had no answer for him.
Right.
Nothing. Everything that everybody had told him in his life had led him further and further and further down a path of destruction, down a path of where he's in, complete despair. Why would I even attempt to talk to him if I couldn't give him that message of hope of the gospel?
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And if you hear when he did the executive order and conversion therapy, like you said, I had people reach out to me and say, he banned conversion therapy. That's a good thing, right? And had to explain what all that involved. And not to mention that he skipped the legislative process because he doesn't make laws.
Right.
And he skipped all of that, which I don't know. Will they try to adjust that?
So I'm actually working on a piece of legislation right now that would repeal or rescind that executive order. Okay. And I will file that on day one.
And that's modus operandi for Andy Beshear. He's going to sign executive orders without the authority of the legislature so he can get press about it. And then anything that happens as a result of legislative actions or even former governors, he's going to take credit for it.
That's right.
That's the way that's the way he's going to do it.
Why?
Plus,
why
it's very deceitful.
Why is this important? And that's the thing, is that we're kind of narrowing down to everyday life and how people being elected. We sat in a committee meeting on last Friday.
Yes.
And in the education committee meeting, and there was a gentleman that was doing a presentation basically talking about cell phones in the school system and the struggle that teachers have with it. And so he started giving some data, and it was absolutely astounding what is happening. One of the things that I can't get away from, it stood out in my mind. 1 in 3 teenage girls has had suicidal thoughts in the last 12 months based on
their research.
One of their research studies. And it went back to 2010 at the introduction of social media, and that's a conversation for another podcast that we'll definitely dive into. But the house is literally on fire.
Right.
And so I don't think that we can push hard enough, fast enough, to do everything that needs to be done, because things have got so out of control.
Right.
I think it was 1 in 5 teenage girls, and he really brought out a lot of the statistics on the girls because they're so affected emotionally by the body shaming stuff, the bullying stuff, the competition to keep up with somebody else's social media profile. But 183% increase in suicides and suicidal thought, things of that nature. And so that's why that having people in these places that gives us the freedom to be able to reach out and to minister and to have the support and backing to make legislation that stops some of this.
One thing that I would say too is, just again to your point, showing the house is on fire, is that I think everybody would say, yeah, it's probably a good thing for them not to have cell phones in school. And then so many videos have come out from the past week of kids videoing their teachers and what they're saying in the classrooms, like berating people for supporting Trump or for their parents supporting Trump. And, we're talking about that house being on fire. It's almost like, well, wouldn't we want that in there for us to know? Because we would never know.
Right.
They're protected by the teachers' unions. The teachers' unions agree with them. They're protected by the administration and everything else. They're not going to get fired. If the student makes an accusation without having that video, they're going to take the teacher's word for it, and we've just we're in such a catch-22 that we need to do something good for the students, but because there's so much bad there, it's like we feel almost reservations about maybe doing that.
And I think it's because of the way that speech has been pushed back into a corner if it's not the kind of speech that they approve of. And Kamala even said that she was planning to do everything she could with executive orders to inhibit free speach.
Yeah. Right. I was talking to some high school students. There was a group of high school students, and again, try to keep people anonymous because this is a local thing, but it was in like a political setting. And I was talking to them about us maybe starting like a Young Republicans organization at our local high school. And one girl was like, I would be all for it. She said, but everybody's just afraid to say if they're Republican. They're afraid of, how they'll be treated and stuff like that. Maybe that's different because that was before, the election results or whatever. Right. But that if you really think about it, a lot of those people that are 16, 17, 18 now, 8 years ago, they were 10. Whenever 8 years ago, 9 years ago, whenever Trump first started running, they were 10 or 9 years old or even younger. They've grown up in this their whole life. Right. All of their formative years have been overshadowed by a media demonization of Trump and his supporters. Right. And you think about the trepidation even that their parents have had maybe of saying that they support, even in a very red area like this.
Yes.
That's what they've grown up under.
Well, you had professors after Trump won that told them they could actually take some time off if they needed it, and they were going to do listening circles to help you talk through it. This is in college.
Can I just say that college was already going woke whenever I went to college.
Yeah.
But there was like 7 inches of snow on the ground one time, and my German teacher still had German class. I had to drive in my Nissan Sentra an hour to go to my German class. Sorry.
Well, not just that, but what about the women that are getting on social media and saying
divorce your husband,
leave
your boyfriend,
if you have a conservative boyfriend, you need to break up with him. Don't have any kids. But I don't want to forget something I was going to bring up. Yeah. I won't say where it's at because I don't want it to get out and then the government come down on them. But I had somebody tell me that they went to a school in Kentucky today, a public school, for a Veterans Day event of sorts, and he said the students gathered around and sang Amazing Grace and did the Pledge of Allegiance and sang another hymn. He just said it was refreshing to him to hear and see that and realize that is still in some areas, the kids feel like that they it's okay to do that. They don't feel like that they're going to be retaliated against for having just saying what they believe in.
Right. And it would probably be so infuriating to the point of like a nationwide outrage. If we knew, not in, areas like you're talking about, but if we knew how many students had been given bad grades because, think about this. If a teacher's going to stand up and say that they wish all Trump supporters would jump off a bridge, you think they won't give your child a bad grade if they wear something that they don't like or if they don't support the thing they don't like? Whereas if you think, a teacher would never do that, most teachers are great, but there's a bunch of lunatics out there.
Yes.
And if they're on video saying that they want you to jump off a bridge, where's the moral line for them to say, well, I'm going to give them a correct grade for their test, even though I know that they support Trump and they wrote about it in this paper?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing is that
they've grown up under it for years.
Yes, they have. And this is what I do know is that most people that love liberty and they love the freedom that we have, they are okay with people that disagree with them.
Yes.
And that is the difference. And I've heard people make the statement that, well, they're not burning the Capitol down, and I will say he's not been inaugurated yet.
Right.
So we don't know what could happen between now and then.
There's a lot of election deniers on the Democrat side right now.
But if the people that said if Donald Trump gets elected that they're going to leave the country, if they all move, we may not have any of that happen.
A Kentucky legislator, I don't know if you've seen, he put out something. He said he had started a fundraiser actually, and it was a leftist luggage fundraiser. And what he said was, if you'll bring me receipts that you have literally sold your property and you have tickets to get out of the country because you hate the direction this country is going in conservatism,
he'll buy their luggage.
I'll buy your luggage to help you get out.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing because that's something that people have talked about, for 4 years now is January 6th. Mm-hmm. And it's not just at a national level. They talk about it on a local level. Well, January 6th, Here's the main thing another thing about winning the popular vote and gaining ground in blue states. The American people have rejected the media's narrative about January 6th. Why is that? Just 2 months before January 6th, they had, as far as we know, even though there's 10 million Democrat votes missing for some reason in this election, they had rejected Trump on a national level and in several states. Mm-hmm. Biden, who could barely speak, they had rather had him in there than Trump. What happened that made them not trust the media narrative on this? Here's the first thing, and I'm trying to break it down real quick here. Here's the first thing. The media had to tie it to Trump. They had to blame him for it.
Right.
So they said that he incited them to violence, right? Now, we all saw the people that went in there, and I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah.
I don't agree with it. We also saw the people that just walked in and just walked through. We also saw the massive amount of people that didn't go in at all.
Right.
if he had been inciting them to violence, why didn't the whole crowd go in?
Yeah.
If it was his fault, everybody saw that.
Yeah.
Everybody could tell there was something that was like, well, they are obvious. Even if they thought he was wrong in what he said, it was so obvious, and they didn't break it down that way, as detailed as I have there, then they could tell that it was not, that they were trying to pin more on him than was due to him. Mm-hmm. And then you see the cities burning the summer before and all of those things. The American people, even though the Democrats have been calling Trump supporters for the past week uneducated, the education is the problem, whatever, they're not idiots.
Right.
They can look at what happened there and see how desperate the Democrats were.
Common sense.
To tie January 6th to his words. Everybody was watching the speech.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say there?
And we hope.
And everybody heard AOC saying that she felt threatened and she wasn't even in the Capitol building.
Right.
And they do. And they say those things. For instance, they said, they've done the Nazi comparison and that they're going to be put in camps.
Yeah.
And they're going to become enslaved and all that. So I'm like, get off the radio and TV and go hide if you think that's really going to happen. Quit putting your face out there.
So bad. Oh my goodness.
If everything works out here in the next couple of weeks, we plan to have Nick Searcy is going to be here with us for the podcast. And that's when he's actually done a couple of documentaries about January the 6th and what happened, and has a lot of knowledge to bring to the table on it. And I was talking to him about this not too long ago, and I was talking to a gentleman today who did 45 days in a federal prison and 36 months with an ankle bracelet on,
Yeah.
And we were talking, and he's so excited that Trump got elected, as I would be if I was him,
right?
And we were talking about pardons, if sentences would be commuted and that type of thing. And this is the thing. I think that they have to if he puts the proof out there,
right,
specifically shows the proof that we had FBI and that was involved in inciting this to happen, which has been shown in several instances, then I think at that point, common sense, again, with the American people, they will look at it and say, this is the right thing to do.
Here's kind of my point too. If they had just come out and said, which they can't, because the only thing worse than the government trying to do something is them trying to cover up what they're doing. That's how bad it gets. Right. But if they had just come out and said, we had these guys here, or this many people that were embedded with what we thought might be domestic terrorist cells. These are the people who actually caused the problem. These people need to be arrested. The other people need to be given a warning. If they had been transparent about it, I really don't think that Donald Trump would have even, gotten the traction to run. And if then they hadn't prosecuted him and done all of this stuff, I really don't think he would have gotten that traction. I think people would have turned to somebody like DeSantis, but it was just so obvious. And whenever it came out, well, yes, there's FBI agents there, but we're not going to tell you how many were there. Then everybody's like, well, how do we know any of them weren't FBI agents?
And how do we know what's true and what is not? I have talked to people that were there. I've talked to people that went to prison that were there.
Right.
There is a constituent of mine that just went to prison 2 weeks ago, I think it was. So. And he's looking at 4 years in prison, I think, based on what happened. But this is the thing. What they say happened and what these people that were actually there are saying happened is total different things.
And who are you going to trust now? Because it's obvious they're lying.
Right. And a lot of these people are great people. They always have been. They've been upstanding people in their communities. And there was situations that people got caught up in that was incited. And the thing with Ashley Babbitt being killed, an individual that I talked to that was there when it happened, and then the way the media said it happened was absolutely false.
Right.
And so I think it's just important. There's so much to get done for this president to do. And as Republicans, and I'm a Republican, I run on the Republican ticket, I'm a legislator for everybody in my district.
Right.
I represent conservative principles. But as a Republican, D.C. has a mandate to get stuff done. They have to get it done.
Yeah.
And there's so much to do. You have the national debt. You have all these January 6 people. You have the open border. You have trade deficit. You got the war with Ukraine. You have China and what they're doing. You have Iran and what they're doing. You've got Israel. The world is on fire, and I don't think that you can be aggressive enough. You have to be methodical. You have to have strategy, but we need them to get stuff done.
Here's and maybe this is like the right point maybe to say this, but if you're talking about like immigration policy, which is something that thanks to Joe Biden affects everybody. Now,
it does.
It affects us. It affects everybody. You know, if you're talking about immigration party as a policy, then, you know, we're talking about transitioning from your campaign rhetoric to now putting it into action.
Right.
And how to do that.
Right.
I saw something from, again, Charlie Kirk. If I say something, he's not going to like hunt me down. Probably. It's not like, we're on par with them, but I saw him talking about Tom Homan's going to come in and, they're going to start with workplace immigration deportation. So here was my thought, and this takes a little bit to break down, but if you're talking about people that are going to run in local elections or whatever it is, how they transfer their campaign promises into policy and how to do that effectively. So he said he's going to start with workplace immigration and start going into workplaces and rounding people up and deporting them. So from my perspective, then I say, to me, that sounds like I'm saying we don't need to make a mistake here. Right. You don't want to, you're under pressure to deport a lot of people because you campaigned on mass deportation. But the reason you campaigned on mass deportation, that it was necessary, is because of how many people are dying.
Right.
How many people are being killed by immigrants. So it's not just, don't shift from the main thing that made your message effective was the number of people that are dying, and then take your solution to that and just try to jump the numbers up. Because I don't care if you deport 500,000 or 6 million illegal immigrants. If the murders don't stop, it doesn't help anything. So workplace immigration, most of the time, and we're talking about workplace immigration, not just farmers and stuff like that using illegal immigrants. But most of the time, those are people who came in legally, but their papers expired a lot of times. You need to make, if that policy is going to be effective and you're not going to spend the first 7 months of your campaign making mistakes and letting the Democrats get back into the elections, you need to make a decision between those who broke the law coming into the country and those whose papers expired. Right. The ones whose papers expired most likely aren't the criminals. Right. So you're automatically able to target the group by making that division that is most likely to contain the criminals and the gangs that are causing so much problem.
Because they're talking about self-deportation. Right. But those that are criminals aren't going to do that.
Yeah. It's like asking criminals to self-report their murder, or self-turn in their guns.
Those that are interested in being here legally or wanting to do things right, they're the ones that would use that to not be
right. And you have a chance to keep people that are hardworking or that are working already and pay taxes because they have the paperwork to pay taxes. They're not mooching off the system. You give them a little bit of time to get their stuff lined out, or to self-deport if they need to, and they're not going to get their paperwork back.
Right.
Without ruining their life.
And that's why I said it has to be methodical. Yes. There has to be strategy in what you do.
But you got to do the thing. You got to stop the murders.
You have to do it. Yeah. You have to do it. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch how this happens. And I know there's people that will listen to this podcast. There's people in my district that are not happy that Trump won. They don't like him. And I get all of that. This is what I'm saying is we have to hold them accountable to what they said that they are going to do.
Yes.
So we got to get the right person as the majority leader in the Senate. We have to have the right speaker in the House. We hit 218 today in the House. So we've got the majority. We've got the mandate. We've got the man. Right. We got to get it done.
Get stuff done.
And I say that I'm starting to feel so unburdened by what has been.
You'll be more burdened once you get that head shaved. So,
and I said at our Republican Party meeting on Thursday, then I said, I do feel a sense of relief. You know what I'm saying? But I don't feel a sense of yeah, my team won, because there's a lot of work to do.
Right.
We even, like, my focus mainly is here in this county. We have a lot of work to do because we have to prove to the people of Breckenridge County that voting for the Republican Party is better for you. Your life's going to be better. We're going to do a good job to the offices that we're elected to.
Right.
We're going to make decisions that are going to be better for you and are going to protect your property rights.
Mm-hmm.
Because we could go on this for a long time, but property rights are the foundational difference between American government and every other government.
Right.
It was a revolutionary idea that you could own property. That was the American dream.
Yes.
And so if we
life,
as
liberty,
conservatives...
and the pursuit of happiness was originally life, liberty, and property.
Yes.
Yes.
And
so
that's
that
why after that their original plan after the Civil War was to give them 10 acres and a mule.
Mm-hmm.
That was seen as a high symbol of status in our society.
Right.
So whenever we're talking about Republican people and Republican candidates, if they're going to go in either at the local level on the fiscal court or at the state level in Frankfurt and allow drones to fly on your property whenever a deer gets sick, or they're going to tell you whether or not you can put solar panels on your property at the local level, that is Republican people claiming to be conservative. Oh, we're the real conservatives, but they're treading on your property rights.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That is completely anti-conservative.
I'd have to say I wouldn't mind to have the mule. I have ridden a mule one time. I actually did. And we were horseback riding, and this gentleman brought a mule. And so I got on it and rode it for a little while, and I have to say that nothing can jump a ditch like a mule can. So I could see why that was considered the American dream.
There you go.
Right. There you go. There were a lot of other things that should have gone on along with that policy, and you could talk about restoration. I mean, there's people that literally have made careers out of talking about age of, or what's it called? My brain's not working right now, but immediately after the Civil War, the Andrew Johnson presidency and that age of, I think it wasn't age of reconciliation, but it's like age of restoration policies. Mm-hmm. You could talk about that for ages. And there's a lot of people nowadays that talk about that time period nonstop, and say that we owe them reparations or whatever it is. But the simple fact is that you can't as a party tread on people's property rights. You shouldn't, and claim to be a Republican.
Yeah.
You've got to respect it.
This is what I think will be the true tell as to how serious that they are about saving this country. And I believe that the moral issues, the social issues are the preeminent things, because we know that God blesses those specific things, and he judges with an immoral society. But I think when we see how they go after the national debt and go after spending, that is going to show us how serious they are about actually fixing government. And then how we address the bureaucracy.
Yes.
So if they don't address the bureaucracy and they don't try to fix the national debt, then there's a lot of talk, but it's not.
Here's the thing
serious.
About people try to celebrate, people try to separate the economy and the national debt from Christian morality. Mm-hmm. They're stealing from our grandkids.
Right.
They've already stolen everything they can get from you, unless something changes. Everything they can get from your kids, and now they're taking from your grandkids.
Yeah.
So thieving, even if it's the government thieving,
it's wrong.
That is, a moral issue.
Right.
And it's not like if they were like, look, we're in debt, but here's our plan to get out of debt, that would be something different. Here's how we leverage our debt, whatever.
Right.
But they're just letting it go wild.
Well, there's been some conversation about Congressman Massey being the Secretary of Agriculture, which would be amazing, what he would do there for small farmers and for our food, all that is entailed in that. But when I was with him the other day, and he wears that debt badge, so it's constantly calculating the debt, and he just wears it everywhere he goes, and he he said he gets in the elevator sometimes with other legislators, and he said they're like turning their head. They don't want to see it, because it really brings into reality how bad of a condition that we're in.
If he hadn't built it himself, it'd probably be like smoking by now.
That's right.
He's a good engineer. So,
So we got a lot to do.
Yeah.
We at Frankfort have a lot to get done. We're going to be doing a lot of things in this podcast over the next several months. We would love your input. If you have something that you specifically would like for us to discuss on here, questions that you want us to answer, we will do that. We've got some guests lined up over the next little bit that are going to be coming in, participating with us in the podcast. We need you to like it. We need you to share it. We need you to post our podcast out on social media. Let people know that we're here, that we're doing this, and we will get better as we go. We're learning as we do this. But when it comes to time for legislation and when we are in Frankfort, this will be one way that we will be able to let you know what is going on, let you know if there is call to action, and be able to keep you informed and engaged and help us save our country.
I think too, there's kind of like a secondary conflict going on as well, which we've talked about several times, is there's certain people who have been in elected office for a long time, and they want to handle things a certain way. And the public is wanting more transparency from their government. The people in government always look around and say, why don't people trust us? But they don't do anything about it, and people are really wanting to be able to trust their government. Right. I mean, if you really think about it on a global scale, we're in a time of a lot of upheaval. And people want to be able to trust their government that they're not going to be doing something dumb, with our lives.
Right.
Here's the thing, if the people can trust the American government, they'll do what they did in World War II, which is go take on the biggest, baddest, most evil dictator that you can imagine with the biggest army and the most technology, and they'll kick their butt.
Yeah.
That's what the American people will do. I don't know if we can say butt on this podcast or not. Japan and Germany, that's what the American people will do. They want transparency. And that's what originally, whenever you had talked about this podcast, that was one of the main things you were concerned about, is about being transparent
right.
with what's going on in Frankfort. There's people in Frankfort that don't want that to happen. You're seeing that on the national level. They're trying to elect their speaker, and they're trying to keep it secret. We don't want people having input on this. It's a new time, and you need to establish trust with your constituents.
Right.
One of the best ways to do that is just be transparent with them.
Right.
If you're not transparent, they're just going to continue thinking like we've always done. Well, they've been lying to us this whole time. Why would we believe anything else? We're in a time of lowest trust of the media, lowest trust of the government. Start giving a little bit and taking the constituents' trust into consideration.
And this is what I believe. If they trust, they'll engage.
That's right.
And that's what we need. People have disengaged.
Yes.
And we need parents to engage in their kids' life. We need parents to engage in their child's education.
Yeah.
We need people's constituents to engage in government and to hold us accountable to what we say we're going to do, and to hold us to the fire, to stand on principle. And if we say we're conservative, be conservative. But don't just be conservative. Make conservative policy. Get the government out of people's lives.
One more little point. I'm sorry. And then about the transparency thing and schools and kind of tying all that together. One of the best things that you can ask your children whenever they come home from school is, what'd you learn at school today? What happened at school today? Engaging in that.
Right.
We're getting into a time where there's like a national mandate for more transparency from the schools, from the government. You shouldn't be afraid. Now, I know we've just spent 4 years of parents getting kicked out of, Board of Education meetings, school board meetings, arrested, threatened, investigated by the FBI as if they're domestic terrorists. But this time that we have now, don't let all that you've gone through these past 4 years steer you away from the fact that we are right now, this is our opportunity.
Right.
Demand transparency from your education system that your children are learning from.
Right.
And that's what you can do. And that's what you can do in this time while others are doing.
The point is that we've said that there's a lot to get done.
Right.
And Washington needs to get to work.
Yeah.
But there's a lot for all of us to do.
That's right.
It's important.
And I give this this example at the Republican meetings all the time. I think I gave it last time we were on the podcast, maybe, but the missionary focus that we've been taught from the book of Acts is you take care of Jerusalem first, Judea, then Samaria, then the uttermost parts of the earth, which basically means take care of where you live. Look out for your house. So that means be involved. Right now, we're entering into an age, we'll call it the age of transparency, 4 years of transparency. Be transparent, demand transparency for your house. What are your kids doing on online video games? Who are they talking to? Right? Who are they talking to on the internet? What are they being taught at school? Get involved in that. Demand transparency, especially in anything that the government is involved in. Demand transparency. This is the time to do that.
Yes.
And then in your community, demand, why are they spending this money on, get engaged and figure out, why are they paving this road instead of that road? We need people that are engaged in that. You don't have to come across as like, well, the government's trying to pave my road for communism. You don't have to do that, but you're trying to, what can you do during this time? Right now, we have voted because we want 4 years of freedom to be able to work. Now, everybody has to work. You work in your community and then in your state, communicate with your state legislator, blow his phone up all day. And, and then you engage on the national level as well.
Right.
Don't listen to media sources that aren't transparent.
Yeah.
The ones that have been lying to you for the past 20 years, don't listen to them anymore. Maybe you like the person that's on there, but demand transparency in your media. Search out those that are just going to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I agree.
Sorry.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you for engaging in this podcast, for those of you that are listening. And again, make sure you get the word out. Let people know that we're here. Send in your questions. You can actually comment on this video. My email address is joshcalloway79@gmail.com. And so if you want to send me a question in, reach out to me. But thank you for listening. God bless.